So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So I imagine that if I put the names Shel Silverstein, Bill W., and King David in one sentence and said to you, okay, let's take a guess as to what they have in common. You might have to pause for a few minutes. Years. Huh? Oh, they all have beards. Okay. So you might have to pause a few more minutes. At least that is pretty much the premise of my drosh, so let's just work with that. So they might all have beards, but I'm not certain about Bill W. But here's the thing, they are very disparate kind of works, very different kinds of authors, very different kinds of means about them. And yet I would like to share with you that I believe there is a very profound connection between Shel Silverstein's The Missing Piece, Bill W.'s own story in the Big Book, and his own story and how it translates into one of the primary steps of the 12-step program, and also a psalm, a very powerful psalm that we have within the book of Psalms that, according to Jewish tradition, was written by King David. So what connects them? Let's begin with this, the missing piece. I just got to ask, quick show of hands, how many people have read this? Okay. For those of you who have not read The Missing Piece, you can borrow it after shul. Amazing book. Shel Silverstein is also the author of The Giving Tree, wrote this book. And in this book, there is I don't know if you want to call it a rock or a circle, right? And the circle is missing a piece. And the circle feels bad about missing this piece, and so goes out of her kind of, gender-neutral way of finding his missing piece. And he goes through and he rolls along, and he can't roll really fast because, as you know, if you've ever had a flat tire, when something round like that is missing its piece, it don't roll so well. And so not being able to roll so well, he's slowed up, and he can, in the process of trying to find his missing piece, he comes across different things, flowers, butterflies, all of these fascinating things in the world about him as he tries to find that one piece that will make him perfect. Eventually, he'll come and he'll find, after a number of experiments and adventures, he'll find his missing piece, he'll join with the missing piece, and now he's whole, now he's perfect, and now he rolls. But he rolls so well because of his perfection that he no longer has time to stop and admire the flowers or talk to the butterfly or do any of those things that it so enjoyed doing on its journey to perfection. That eventually, he will let go of the piece. He will let go of his missing piece, realizing that his perfection did not make his life better. His perfection made his life worse. And that it was his imperfection that allowed him to be vulnerable enough to appreciate the world around him. Such is the story of the missing piece. Why would that have anything to do with the Big Book and with Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous? This is a book I've had some time to read, and I've done so in part because anyone who's a student of American religion understands and knows that AA is, in fact, and has been over the past century, the single largest growing religion within the United States, even if it does not officially acknowledge it itself and doesn't talk about itself that way. But the lessons and the steps themselves have such profound religious resonance that one can't help but pay attention to and be aware of what AA has to offer. And in talking about his own struggle, Bill W. will say the following. He talks about his experience he had in a church an experience he couldn't really understand because he wasn't really looking towards or particularly inclined to believe in an organized religion. And he says the following about reflecting on this experience that he had. He said, for a brief moment, he said, I needed and wanted God. There had been a humbling willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by the worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it had ever been ever since, how blind I had been before. In this brief section, what Bill W. is talking about is this sense of not being able to be in control, to not have the ability, to have the power to overcome his own addiction to alcohol. And how in a humbling moment, he says, he became aware and open and wanted and needed God, and here to use some AA language, however you define that term. He realized he needed God, that he himself was not self-sufficient, that he himself was not perfect, that he was vulnerable, that he was powerless, that he, like the missing piece, could not do without the acknowledgement of his own imperfection. Now, in the missing piece, the story unfolds that being perfect caused the missing piece to miss life. But within Alcoholics Anonymous and within Bill W.'s story, his claim at perfection isn't a matter of his missing life, though that is certainly what he felt he did as an alcoholic. But more than that, this notion of being able to do it all blocked him from the actual first step of healing that he required. His sense of his own perfection, his own ability to do it, his own powerfulness was an obstacle, the primary obstacle towards him being able to come together and gain some sense of ability to deal with the alcoholism that had taken over his life. He knows that to feel that one is all-powerful and perfect prevents one from healing, prevents one from growing. And that's why step one in the 12-step program is admitting one's powerlessness. So we now have Shel Silverstein and Bill W. King David. Let's see how we do. Psalm 51, within the book of Psalms, beautiful psalm where David describes the challenges he feels at being someone who is in need of forgiveness, someone who has sinned. And then in reflecting upon all that has happened within his own life, he says, Zivchei Elohim, that the true offering, the true sacrifice to God, Zivchei Elohim, is a lev nishbara. Does anyone know what that means? Lev means heart. Nishbara. Anyone want to give that one a go? Broken, exactly. A lev nishbara is a broken heart. And this, according to King David, is a true offering to God. Not the whole heart, not that which is perfect, but on the contrary, that which is broken, that which is flawed, that which is damaged. That's the one that can offer a true sacrifice. Because the one who is so perfect in themselves and in their world has no space for anyone else, let alone God. The one who thinks they're perfect is the one who can do it all. And they do not realize in that miasma, that cloud in which they live of self-delusion, that the reality is all of us rely on others. All of us are vulnerable. All of us are imperfect. Ours is a culture that tries to build up our self-esteem, and we wonder why it is that religion is losing ground. Because in building up the self-esteem, we've gone so overboard that we fill ourselves up with ourselves and with our achievements. We lose the sight of our need and reliance on others. What King David does is he takes it even further. And he said, that reliance, that need, that very imperfection is exactly who we are when we are authentically ourselves. Hence, Zivchei Elohim, the true offering to God, is a lev nishbara, is that which is broken. It's the broken spirit that can really come in prayer. It's the broken spirit that has room in their soul for them, for God and for others. It is that which is broken that is essential to acknowledge. Which is why this Torah portion is so problematic. Because within the Torah portion, we talk about, as Griff noted, we talk about the priests and the requirements to be a priest who can come before God and make the offerings. And it'll describe the offerings that can be brought. And when describing the priest, the Torah says, V'chol ish asher bo mum. Upon each person, v'chol ish, who has a mum, who has a defect, that person, that priest, is not permitted to bring offerings. And we'll go even further. And we'll say again, v'chol asher bo mum, any animal that has an imperfection, that too cannot be brought as an offering. And so I ask ourselves, that doesn't feel right to us, does it? It doesn't feel right to us because in our age, we see the arc of justice bend. We see the arc of history, as Martin Luther King says, bend towards justice. And we understand that in order to be just, we have to be more inclusive of the people around us, not less inclusive. And in seeing the arc of history bend towards justice, we understand that our actions need to be dictated by compassion towards others, especially those who suffer any kind of disability, who suffer any kind of defect. We're called upon to be even more compassionate. We've developed laws because we understand that people who have these disabilities have rights that we as a society must enshrine and protect. And yet here our Torah comes, and in talking about the priests and the animals, it says, no, if it has a mum, it has a defect of any kind, can't be brought. So it goes against our sensibilities. But it's not just our sensibilities. It goes against the Torah's sensibilities. The Torah's sensibility, as I mentioned to Griff in his charge, of being egalitarian, of including all, of making that ever so radical statement that all of us are created b'tselem Elohim. And in doing so, it places upon that obligation to us to be compassionate and to be inclusive. So how do we resolve a text that says that the true offering is that of the broken heart, with a text within our very own tradition, our very same tradition that says only those who are perfect can bring such offerings, and only those offerings themselves must be perfect? I believe the way that we can do so is through the following text. Rabbi Alexandri, rabbi who lived about 1,700 years ago, said that if a person uses a broken vessel, it is considered to be an embarrassment. But if God seeks something, God actually seeks out that which is broken for God's uses. As it says, God is the healer of shattered hearts. A person uses a broken vessel, it's not right. God, on the other hand, seeks out that which is broken in order to use, because that's just the way God works. As I consider this midrash, I use it as a way of resolving this tension between perfection and imperfection in the following manner. To me, it seems to say that those priests doing those offerings and those animals up there that are being offered are not ideals themselves, but they are vessels. They are instruments. They are tools. And even though I will tell you, and there are many who have been to my house who can attest to this, that I am not much of a handyman. Trust me, it is a joke in my world. Even I know that a broken hammer is no way to try to fix something. Even I know that a screwdriver that doesn't actually have that little end that allows you to put it into the screw isn't going to work. If we understand the priests and the animals as tools, not as ideals, We understand that we ourselves would never use a tool for a project that doesn't work. It would be an embarrassment. It would be silly. It would be contrary to what we're trying to do. And if we understand the priests and the animals as tools, we're able to move beyond that discomfort in that phrase, kol ish asher bo mum, anyone that has a defect. And we're able to see, as the rabbis see, that even though humans can't use tools that are imperfect, all of us are instruments of God. And in God's eyes, all of us, in our brokenness, can be sought out for God's purposes. So far from barring the offerings brought with any kind of disability, our tradition believes that God cherishes them all the more and believes that it's only the broken that can bring the true sacrifice. So we see that it's within our very narrow parameters that we can actually define something as perfect, and that it's only things that we create that have the possibility of being perfect. But it's only those tools. And my friends, people are not tools. Let me rephrase that. People are not instruments. I've met a few tools in my time. But we are not instruments. We are all blemished. We are all flawed. We are all imperfect. And as my teacher, Rabbi Brad Artson, has taught, while instruments may be disqualified over a blemish, people never are. Kol ish asher bo mum, any person with a defect. This verse from the Torah portion this week is a challenge to us. We need to understand that I, you, all of us, we are that ish, we are that person. And just as my defect does not disqualify me, but actually enhances the worth of what I can bring before God, so too I must learn to accept the offerings of those people who are around me who are just as equally defective as I am, just equally imperfect, and be able to accept what they offer in all of their perfect imperfection. And it would be my hope that if we can but hold on to this thought, that perhaps over the course of the next day, next 2 days, perhaps even the next week, if we can just remember the perfection of imperfection and how such things are so desired by God, if we can remember that, perhaps we can just be a little bit more patient, a little bit more kind, and a little bit gentler to the people around us. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.